Hello, friends. Welcome to the New Hope Online sermon for May 1st, 2022. And it's been a nice enough weekend. Saturday night for me, it's a nice enough weekend that I can be out on the back porch. And I'm sure that a lot more things will come from back here over the course of the next few weeks. And if you notice during the course of the sermon that I have on a pink bracelet, it's not because I went clubbing this weekend and I'm working on my disco moves. I'm in the middle of my grandson's baseball tournament. So that's the scoop for that. For today, our gospel reading, it's a long one, but it's a great reading, so just stick with me. It's from John chapter 21, one of the post-resurrection appearances of Jesus, beginning with verse 1 down through verse 19. Afterward, Jesus again appeared to his disciples by the Sea of Galilee. It happened this way. Simon, Peter, Thomas, also known as Didymus, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and two other disciples were together. I'm going out to fish, Simon Peter told them, and they said, "We'll go with you." So they went out, got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not recognize that it was Jesus, and he called out to them, "Friends, haven't you any fish?" "No," they answered. He said, "Throw your net on the right side of the boat and you will find some." And when they did, they were unable to haul the net in because of the large number of fish. Then the disciple, whom Jesus loved, said to Peter, "It is the Lord." As soon as Simon Peter heard him say, "It is the Lord," he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off, and he jumped into the water. The other disciples followed in the boat, towing the net full of fish, for they were not far from the shore, about 100 yards. When they landed, they saw a fire of burning coals there with fish on it and some bread. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish you have just caught." And so Simon Peter climbed back into the boat and dragged the net ashore. It was full of large fish, but even with so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." None of the disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Lord. Jesus came, took the bread, and gave it to them, and did the same with the fish. This was now the third time Jesus appeared to his disciples after he was raised from the dead. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," he said, "you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my lambs." Again Jesus said, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He answered, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Take care of my sheep." The third time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him a third time, "Do you love me?" He said, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my sheep. Very truly, I tell you, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted, but when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go." Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. Then, let me start with an interesting fact. It used to be fashionable among New Testament scholars to say that this final section of John was a late add-on to the gospel, placed there by a later editor. And the main reason for that is, if you look at the end of the previous chapter, chapter 20, it does sound like a perfect ending. It ends this way. Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples which are not recorded in this book. But these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. The view that this chapter 21 is an add-on is not as popular an opinion today. For one thing, because if that were the case, you'd expect to find a manuscript tradition without chapter 20. But all the ancient manuscripts of John's Gospel have chapter 21 intact. And it seems actually perfectly John-like to me, this chapter, as I will point out as the sermon goes on. The past few weeks, we've had a chance to dip into John's Gospel a couple of different times. A few weeks ago in January, we looked at the story of Jesus' first miracle in John chapter 2. And then for the Easter sunrise service a couple of weeks ago, we considered the first part of John chapter 20, John's account of the resurrection. In both chapters, what we noticed were powerful symbols. Wine, water, banquet in John chapter 2. And then in the John 20 resurrection account, we noticed how John uses the phrase both at the front and back end of the story of the resurrection. He uses the phrase on the first day of the week. At first, it's early on the first day of the week, and then at the end of that section, it is in the evening of the first day of the week, a phrase that any Bible, Torah immersed Jew would have recognized as the beginning phrase of the Genesis creation story. Hearing those words, the listener would have thought, aha, John is telling us a creation story. With Jesus' resurrection, a new creation has begun. And that's the way John tends to work. He invites reader or listener into the story. He sort of trusts their intelligence. He expects them to see or to figure out what's really going on in the mystery of the story that he tells. Not mystery like some secret code where you add up the letters of a person's name and discover things hidden from all but a few brilliant decoders. Not that kind of mystery, but mystery in the sense of insight that comes to anyone who believes in Jesus and has their eyes and ears open. In the Gospel of John, his mysteries are accessible ones. And in our Gospel reading today, John is at his best, inviting the reader in on what he has to say. And here is the scene, and tell me if it doesn't invite you in. Do you have a great love for the outdoors? Do you like the smell of a campfire? Do you like to fish? Then this story invites you into it, right? Although I wish the disciples had used fly rods instead of nets, but I'll try to understand their preferred way of fishing. Or do you like hanging out with friends? This story invites you in. Or do you like stories of forgiveness and reunion? John has given us this one. Or do you like food? And I know from experience that all of you do, because I've seen that. But at some point, not long after Jesus' resurrection, his followers went night fishing. That was a good way to fish because the catch would still be fresh for sale in the market. When the sun came up, you'd get a jump on the other fishermen. So they were out doing some night fishing, but no luck. It's good for me to know that sometimes other fishermen get skunked. Well, the next morning, they seemed to be about a football field's distance from the shore, a shore where Jesus happens to be, and he calls out to them, "Any luck?" "No, just not a good day for fishing." Well, throw those nets on the other side because the fish are over there. And they do, and there's this miraculous catch. And then suddenly they recognize that it is Jesus on the bank, the one who earlier in John's gospel had said, apart from me, you can do nothing. Apparently with him, you can do amazing things, even catch fish. Impetuous Simon Peter leaps into the water and swims for the shore. The rest hold on dearly to the net and sort of limp their boat back to shore, where breakfast is already started. John shows us this fire of burning coals and some fish already on the grill, some bread. Add some of your catch to the mix, Jesus says. We'll have a bit of a morning feast here. And they do. And John says that this was now the third time Jesus appeared to his disciples after he was raised from the dead. More evidence that this final chapter of John is a very intentional part of John's story. Storytellers like to work in threes. Now, as much as I hope that you can identify with that part of the story, I think it's more important for all of us to find ourselves in the next part of the story. The part of the story that concerns Simon Peter, the disciple who back in chapter 18, after the Last Supper and then Jesus' arrests, he famously disassociates himself from Jesus not once, not twice, but 3 times. Hey, Mr. Folks inquired of Peter, you're part of that group that follows Jesus, aren't you? And Peter's like, me? Whoa, I don't know the guy. I have nothing to do with him. 3 times. 3 shameful denials. We can all see a little bit of Peter in us, can't we? I mean, the rooster has crowed our guilt too, right? As for me. So we've got Peter, bad friend, weak, coward, liar, passionate one moment, cold the next, self-focused, under pressure only looking out for number 1. So please today let's stand with Peter rather than in condemnation of him. As Jesus asks him the question, Peter, New Hopian, visitor to the website, do you love me more than these? By the way, that question can mean a couple of different things in the context of the story. It can mean, do you, Peter, after claiming you love me better than the rest of these disciples, after claiming you love me so much you would die for me? Do you really love me like you say? Is it true? Lately seems not, that kind of a thing. Or actually, in the context, the these can refer to these fish, in which case it would be, do you love me more than these? This catch. Do you love me more than fishing? Do you love me more than livelihood? Do you love me more than the vocation that gives you your purpose in the world? Whatever he was getting at, or if he was getting at both things, who knows? Peter says, you know I do love you. Jesus says, feed my sheep. 3 times Jesus asked the question, which was likely excruciating for Peter to hear each time. The 3 questions here obviously connect up to Peter's threefold denial of Jesus. The first time, it was a bad performance 3 times. This time, a better performance 3 times. A lot has been made of the sequence here in chapter 20. Most of it focused on confession, that Jesus makes Peter undo 3 times the denials that he made earlier, as if to earn his way out of his sin, sort of a punishment of sorts. I'm not sure that's the best way of seeing it. I think the Christ who forgave us while we were still sinners, Romans 5:8, has already in the story forgiven Peter. His appearance to Peter and the others is an act of preemptive mercy, it strikes me. All is well. Breakfast is cooking. Forgiveness has been granted, and the door to reunion is wide open. So, the repeated questions aren't to settle a score in Peter's sin account. I think they are for Peter's sake. They are a way for him to spiral out of his own sense of guilt in order for him to understand what Christ gives him. 2 things above all: belonging and purpose. I think that's what we all crave, isn't it? We want to know that we really belong somewhere, and we want to know that we are needed. I mean, have you ever been in a room where you feel you don't belong? It's an awful feeling. And have you ever felt that what you've got, what you bring to the table, isn't good enough, that you're not really needed? We all want to believe that the little dot that is our life, set in this little place and on just the little blip, the briefest blip of earthly time, we want to think that this little dot fits into an important puzzle and that it means something. What does Jesus' barbecue site there, all spread out, suggest to the disciples? It says, I've already got a place set up for you. I want you here. I don't care about your crimes and your past mistakes. You belong with me, and you belong with each other. And then Jesus bestows on Simon Peter purpose. I can't help but remember how at the beginning of Mark's gospel, Jesus calls Peter and Andrew while they're out fishing, and he says, follow me and I will teach you to fish for people. You will have a vocation of gathering up people. And here at the end of John, the metaphor is not fishing, but the metaphor is shepherding. Jesus calls Peter to feed his lambs. You will be a shepherd. You will care for people. You will lead them into fields with green spiritual food. What's so amazing about this calling that Jesus gives to these disciples is that it was Jesus' own vocation while on earth. He is the good shepherd. And now it is time for Peter and the other disciples to take up the mission of love and care. And they aren't just given a job, they are given God's work on earth. Purpose. By the way, I like the way that the theme of purpose and the theme of disciple participation is sort of underwritten in John's account here by verse 10. Whereas the disciples come in, Jesus got things started, but he says, bring some of the fish you've caught. Jesus already has breakfast started, but now they are invited to add their own work to the work that he has started. And that's what discipleship is for us too, the privilege of adding to what Christ has done in our small but very meaningful, adding to it in our small but very meaningful way also. Our work matters, we matter. And it's raining on me now. It's blowing in through the screen, so I'm going to shift my position just a little bit. Pardon me. Okay, I'm back and under my roof. But what a filling meal it was there on the seashore. Not just food that went into the stomach, but the good news of belonging and the good news of purpose that filled their hearts. And this needs to be your breakfast today, too. Understand that you belong. No matter what anybody else thinks, you belong. You belong because Christ says that you do. And that nice filet that's sizzling in the middle of the grill, it is intended for you. And are you thinking that you don't have anything to bring to the table? You are dead wrong. You do. You may not see it yet. God gives you purpose. His Spirit pours on you gifts for the good of all. And certainly every one of us is capable of exercising and growing the primary gift of the Spirit, which is love. You are bringing a lot to the table when you simply forgive others and when you find creative ways to care about those people who are around you. So you matter. You have a purpose. Somewhere along the shoreline of the Sea of Galilee, Peter experienced the profound mercy of God and received something that everybody needs, belonging and purpose. And you might say that this time it took. Peter became a great shepherd of people, guiding the church through its first couple of decades. He fearlessly shared the good news of Jesus until one day, executioners led him, as Jesus predicted, to where he did not want to go and to where his hands were stretched out. They were stretched out on a cross. Tradition says that Peter was crucified upside down on a cross because he didn't feel worthy to die in the same way as his Lord. Peter was faithful to Jesus in death, confident in the hope of Christ's resurrection. It's an important story in a lot of ways. And I want to point out one more way or why these verses that are here, why they make complete sense as a conclusion to John's gospel. Back to the John chapter 2 sermon in January. What is the significance of that first and in some ways very odd miracle of Jesus where he turns water to wine at a wedding party? Well, it's the perfect sign of the new kingdom that God has ushered in, and which is the reason why Jesus has come to earth. He's come to inaugurate that kingdom. And the setting of that first miracle is a party. It's this fellowship of invited guests. Jesus comes to bring us together in community around him. And what's with the wine? Ask those Bible Belt Christians. Well, it is the ancient symbol of joy, of excess, of refreshment. Jesus, at the beginning of John's gospel, inaugurates a happy, safe, comfortable community around food. We can't help but think of the Lord's Supper. And it is with that Jesus ministry begins. And where does John's story end? On the beach. Another fellowship dinner, this one unexpected. And once again, what we have is abundance. 153 fish at their disposal. A good day of fishing, I would say. Never had that kind of day. I could spend a whole sermon talking about the symbolism that different commentators through the ages have drawn out of that number 153. It gets pretty bizarre sometimes what they think is the meaning in that. But I'll tell you what I think it means. I think it means a lot. I think that's what 153 means. It means a lot. Whenever God calls us together, he floods us with goodness. So let's add this to the good news today. You belong, and you have purpose. And what you belong to and what you have purpose in is God's kingdom of abundance. Rejoice in that. Amen.